The HR Happy Hour Network is sponsored by WorkHuman. The role of HR is changing fast, and the leaders who move beyond administration into true business leadership will have the edge. WorkHuman Live is where that shift becomes real. 4 transformative days in Orlando built around the challenges HR leaders are facing now. With 65 plus standout speakers, you'll get practical, research backed insights that you can use immediately, along with honest conversations with leaders under the same pressures and a human first experience designed to energize you, not exhaust. It's why 93% of past attendees left inspired and why you need to be there this April 27th through 30th. Register now at workhumanlive.com and use code HR Happy Hour before February 28th to save 20%. That's HR Happy Hour, all one word. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to the Outwork in America show. My name's Steve Boese. I'm with Trish Steed. Trish, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well. Thank you very much. I'm excited. It is Workplace Movie Hall of Fame week here on the show.
Yay.
Our favorite series. I guess we've been doing these for probably 10 years, give or take. I can't remember, but
We need to have our producer look that up because I think you're right. It's been a long time, but it's one type of episode we get so many comments on and so many requests for. So I guess if you haven't listened in, we're glad you're here. And it's where we jump in. We're going to talk about a movie. They're usually a little older, which this one surprised me a little bit on how old it actually is. It doesn't feel like that. But anyway, so if you have any suggestions for Workplace Movie Hall of Fame, let us know. But for now, we're going to dig into this one. Do you want to do the big reveal?
Today, we're talking about the 2015 movie Spotlight, Trish. This is the Academy Award winning Best Picture of that year. It's an investigative drama. It focuses on the true story of journalists at the Boston Globe who are investigating abuses by clergy in the Catholic Church in Boston, which later, of course, blows up right into a nationwide and a worldwide story, which we know plenty about. The movie was won Best Picture, also won Best Original Screenplay, was nominated for six Oscars overall, directed by Tom McCarthy, starring Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, Rachel McAdams, Liev Schreiber, and also John Slattery. He's not listed here. Was one of my favorites because I was always a Mad Men guy, and he's in this movie as well. But this movie, of course, it's about the investigations into these abuses at the Catholic Church, but it's obviously much more than that. It's a really interesting kind of story about organizations and power dynamics and responsibility in organizations and leadership. There is so much to unpack in this movie from a workplace point of view and a leadership point of view and a people point of view. It's a perfect movie to break down and talk about in a little detail here.
It is. And I was saying earlier, it's one of those that we had to watch at the time, 15 plus years ago, 10, I can't even add, subtract, 10 years ago. But we were watching it for purposes of it was up for an Academy Award or multiple, and we were watching it sort of against other movies at the time. So I'm glad we're revisiting. I feel like I definitely watched it with a different mindset and a different eye for things.
Yeah.
And I guess at the time I first saw it, I didn't really focus so much on the workplace implications and things like systemic, just not even reacting to things, right, as they're blowing up around you and having that then come to fruition in an organization. So, yeah, this is a good one to dig into and definitely one I think that has so many similarities to things we see in organizations today, right?
Yeah, I think there's sometimes it's a little harder on when we break down some of these movies to draw clearer lines or more direct lines into what's happening inside people's normal jobs, right? But this movie, not so much at all. I think it's very, very clear and very direct and very applicable. First, for me, Trish, I'll kick it off with this. To me, in many ways, is a story about ethics and ethical considerations inside organizations, namely, right, when you see or if you see something wrong, something illegal even, or something just maybe not quite principled, or something that just goes against the values of the organization, you see that going on, do you look the other way? Do you rationalize that behavior away? Or do you raise your hand and report up the chain and kind of even to some extent when it's leadership maybe acting against the values of the organization, what do you do? And that dynamic plays out probably in organizations every day, I would say.
It does, and I think it even one step further, Steve, is when you think about with this, there's obviously sort of the organization of the church, right, where the problem is coming from, but then it's all of the other organizations that are also turning a blind eye,
Yeah.
including the newspaper, right? And so I think that happens in real life too. I mean, it kinda reminded me of back in the days of, like, Enron, when
Mhm.
Arthur Anderson was implicated along with them, and then, like, if Enron's going down, they're going down too. So I kind of viewed it with that lens a little bit of like, these aren't just standalone situations necessarily. If you're turning a blind eye and you're not speaking up and saying something, it might not just affect your organization, but it could be your clients or, some other organization you partner with. So, yeah, just so many ties directly.
Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting.
And it can be very easy and very tempting, right, for people
Mhm.
inside organization, especially long established organizations
Right.
to look the other way, right? To protect their own position in the industry or in the community, right? There was a lot of on this particular story that's covered in the movie, right? There was a lot of impetus and momentum behind these large established community organizations like the church and also the Boston Globe, which I
Uh-huh.
didn't look it up. It's probably been going on in Boston for 150 years, if I had to
Right.
guess. But certainly the only, sort of paper of record of Boston. And it's very tempting to, hey, we've got it pretty good here. We're
Yeah.
established, right?
Yeah.
We're the authorities. Let's not rock the boat, right? And but forgetting about the very real victims, right? In this case,
Uh-huh.
that needed some advocacy, right, against
Right.
these powerful institutions. Most of us are not dealing with these kinds of issues in our workplace, but we could be dealing with similar issues on our own
Mhm.
scale. Maybe it's a salesperson who's, exaggerating about the product benefits while trying to close a sale, right? Or maybe it's,
Mhm.
you know,
Maybe it's your CEO doing that.
yeah,
I mean, these
maybe,
things happen, right? Every single
yeah,
day. And even if you look at it from the standpoint of, this was obviously a sexual abuse case, right? Especially against children. But even in your own workplace, even one instance of something like this is huge. So it's not even like in this
yeah.
particular movie, they said there were over 1,000 victims that had come forward. And again, this is back in 2015. I bet if we were to go revisit that now, there have been plenty more, right, that
Mhm.
surfaced, and these were all around the world. So, yeah, I think that it's a little bit naive if you think that things are not going on in your organization. Just having
Mhm.
worked in HR like we have, I know you and I have both seen examples of every type of HR violation or people violation in every kind of organization you can imagine. So, yeah, it's definitely, I remember when I worked in healthcare, it was always the see something, say something, and you feel empowered that there's no retaliation. But I know plenty of people who, whether it's in your industry or in your organization, that you feel scared that there is going to be blowback on you, right?
And I think, yeah, Trish, I think you're right. And I think why in this particular aspect of this story and really sort of one of the main themes of this movie, while it's so relevant for an HR audience, particularly,
Mhm.
is in organizations. HR is sitting in the crosshairs of many of
Oh,
these
completely.
kinds of situations between people doing quote unquote the wrong thing or the unethical thing and others who observing that maybe reporting it through their HR organization and perhaps in some organizations leaders who want to look the other way or as you said are even participating in the behavior. I mean HR can really be squeezed from both ends, right, in these
Mhm.
kinds of stories and it's not an easy thing to navigate and I'm not sure we talk enough about that. That stressor that sits on the backs of
Yeah.
lots of HR people.
Yeah. I wanna mention the fact I wrote it down when you mentioned the community at
Mhm,
large, right, that was impacted by this as well. I think that happens in our own organizations too, because things that might be happening that are internal to you are actually affecting your community as well.
mhm,
In this case, it was very much because, in Boston, it's a very predominantly Catholic community, right?
mhm.
And many of the people on the newspaper, as they went around the room, they were raised Catholic. They had gone to Catholic schools. So
Yeah,
even though it hadn't happened to them specifically, it it was gonna impact their relatives or your belief system, I think that we need to be careful in HR by turning a blind eye to even one inkling of a complaint of any kind, because it's really just the tip of the iceberg, and again, if you do nothing, you're not just hurting whoever's reporting something to you, right?
Mhm.
You're you're hurting a whole community potentially, depending on what it is, right?
Yeah.
But there is a lot of I won't ever name companies I worked for, but they're just I've seen it all. So if you go
Mhm.
and open, your HR management 101 textbook and it gives sort of the lists of everything that could happen in an organization, I have literally seen every single one of those things in real life play out. So again, I think it's about you watch something like this, think of it as what would I actually do if this was reported to me? Would I
Yeah.
do anything? Would I
And
not do anything?
yeah, and the follow-on to that, Trish, which I think
Mhm.
takes us to another interesting aspect of this story and this movie and the case that underlies it,
Yeah.
is when you take that complaint or that issue or that
Mhm.
observation or the whistleblower complaint, whatever we're calling it,
Yeah.
what happens when leadership finds out about it? What do they do? What's their reaction, right? A big element in this story is the investigation by the paper, by the Globe into the
Yeah.
church really gets kickstarted when the Globe gets a new leader, right? A new, I probably
Yes.
executive editor, I suppose was
Yeah.
his title. He comes in from out external to the organization, external to the city. So he's got no entrenched biases or
Mhm.
dedication to any organization in the city or allegiance is the word I'm looking for. To he's just coming in as an outsider. His name is real life. In real life, his name's Marty Barron. He's a real person,
Yeah.
and he comes in and you know is digging into what's going on in Boston and what's going on in the paper, and raises the question on his very first day on the job.
Yeah.
Hey, what are we doing about this story? We're not doing enough about it. Let's get on this story.
Yeah.
And throughout the movie, we see his leadership, not flamboyant, not yelling, not making a scene, just quiet, kind of steady. We are going to do the right thing. We are going to force
Mhm.
transparency. We're going to force the truth to come to light. And eventually you can see how everybody rallies behind that in the organization. And I think that's key for some of these organizations to do the right thing is what does leadership say? What do they model?
Right. And I think you bring up the point of he wasn't sort of screaming, right, standing on a table or something.
Yeah.
I do think you can be sometimes even more effective being that more quiet, resilient type of leader because what he did was he did I think what all good journalists should do, right? He was sort of poking and prodding a little bit, but expecting his team to then start questioning more and go through that process of journalism. And that was one of the notes I made that I didn't really key in on the first time I saw it was it's real when you think about how journalism is supposed to be done, right?
Hmm.
It is about finding the truth, no matter what that is. It is about sort of not sensationalizing things. And this could have been one of those topics that could have been over sensationalized and maybe would have, they might have lost track of who, to your point, who the real victims were.
Yeah.
But because they respected the victims, it wasn't like sort of a National Enquirer kind of a investigation, right? But I
Hmm.
think I I wonder if you agree with this, but like I think nowadays, because newspapers are slowly dying out, or at least, in the way that maybe we grew up with them, some of those really solid journalistic traits and skills have been lost
Hmm.
because a lot of the news we consume is coming from untrained individuals, right? And you and I, we get our news that way too, right? TikTok or Reels or
Sure. Sometimes.
right,
Yeah.
real people out there, but there's a whole lot of opinion that goes along with some of that information.
Hmm.
And I think um it really just made me respect the profession of being a journalist more than I had before, now that I'm seeing that so much of the news we consume isn't done with that rigor and that
Hmm.
solid foundation of, I guess, going out and just gathering facts without really forming an opinion about it necessarily, or to the best of your ability, not putting opinion in. I don't know. I mean, did you kinda
Yeah.
pick up on that too, or
Yeah, I did. The story, well, it's a 2015 movie. The events in the movie are taking place in 2001 primarily. And
Yes.
so, yeah, we're predating, not certainly the internet, but we're predating social media to a large extent, or maybe to a
Yes.
complete extent at that point.
Hmm.
So most news would have been consumed through mainstream, as we say today,
Hmm.
mainstream outlets like the Globe, like the big papers like the Times, like
Sure.
CNN and those kinds of outlets. And so that while they're all still around, right,
Yeah,
it's
in different
certainly
forms. Right.
debatable whether or not they're as important as they used to be, or perhaps you could argue they're even more important than they used to be because of all this other information that's out there too. But I think the leadership here, it's a good lesson as well about just sort of gaining people over to your side, because
Hmm.
he comes in from the outside and wants to investigate the church in a more comprehensive manner.
Hmm.
And quite a few of the folks at the Globe either didn't really want to or felt like they had already done an investigation and didn't really find much. So
Right.
he had to bring people over to his side. And he did that through
Hmm.
listening to their concerns, pushing back but not screaming, but sticking to
Hmm.
intuition and sticking to his principles. And then at a real crucial moment, when the editor says, well, you know, the investigative journalists at the Globe, they have success because they pick their own projects, right?
Right.
He didn't say, well, you're picking this one now, or this is now your project. He says to them in the movie, now I don't
Hmm.
know if this really happened in real life, but in the movie the leader says, would you consider picking this project? Now,
Yes.
of course, he meant, I want you to pick this project,
Right.
but he didn't say it, right? He asked them, right?
Right.
And of course they do, and then the investigation sets off from there. So I think it's a really interesting and uh, some good takeaways there, I thought, on leadership
Sure.
from how they ran that investigation.
Yeah. You mentioned realism. So one of the things I did a ton of research on just to see how accurate was this. And so apparently they had gone back and had asked reporters had asked the spotlight journalists, right? The team that was sort of working on a new project every year for the Globe. And they said that it is almost 100% accurate. They said
Wow.
down to the things that were on their desks, like the
Hmm.
actors' desks, were real. Everything
Yeah.
was as real as they could make it, and each of the actors shadowed and spent extensive time shadowing and working alongside the person they were playing so that they could get the dialogue right, the perspective right, every little detail
Yeah.
right. So, again, I wish I would have known that, or maybe I knew that back when the Oscars were out, but I think too that's why this made such a great Oscar nominee and then ultimately a winner because
Yeah.
it was done with such rigor that I don't think many entertaining movies are subject to, right? They
Hmm.
take some, you know, sort of
Yeah. And
license to
and
make it a
and
better
as
story.
and as a workplace movie too, it really, for in in the pursuit of realism, right?
Mhm.
There's so many little elements that are just what workplaces certainly used to be. Maybe many still are, right? Little rituals like
Oh,
the
yeah.
retirement speech at the beginning of the movie when one of the older
Right?
reporters is retiring and they gather around and have
Mhm.
someone cuts up a cake and they make speeches, or when they're all marching into the 10:30 meeting, right? We've all been in offices that had a certain meeting and the meeting had a name. It wasn't like, oh, the editorial meeting or whatever that it was.
Right.
Oh, the 10:30 meeting, right? Who's going to the 10:30 meeting, right? And
Yep.
then even just things like, having terrible snacks, from the vending machines and things like that. They got a lot of those little details right
Right.
about certainly turn of the century kind of workplaces. It looked like
Mhm.
it. It looked very authentic too, and
Yeah.
it seemed it. I
It's
think
weird to
another,
look at it through this lens though, isn't it? Now 20 years later,
yeah.
25 years later, actually, because you and I both worked in that 2001
Sure.
workplace, right? At the time, through that lens, it didn't look that bad. But now, sort of in hindsight, you look back and think like, why did we work that way? Why did we allow it? Why? Or there's
Mhm.
one point where Mark Ruffalo, his character Mike, is like screaming at his boss, cusses, carries on. I thought,
Mhm.
I've never done that.
Mhm.
I've just, like, how strange to think about going to work and, like, having this big but when I thought about many of the places I worked, I've seen people do that. That was
Mhm.
and I didn't as HR, I didn't go, like, reprimand them or ask them, like, "What's going on?" It was just sort of an expected, like, oh, once in a while people blow up and,
Yeah.
you know, they just let
Mhm.
off steam by yelling at each other. I don't know. It's just very different now is what's acceptable versus what's not in a workplace.
Yeah, I think, I think they really nailed that. I felt like it could have been, any office around that time, certainly a newsroom as well, right? We've seen a lot
Oh,
of these
sure.
kinds of movies around newsrooms, but, very the details really matter, and this movie did a really good job of nailing those details to present that really authentic workplace experience.
Yeah,
Um, the another topic I wanted to bring up, Trish, is and something I've been talking about a lot. In fact, I recorded a workplace minute today. So this will have been out by the time this podcast runs about elder care. I've been on caregiving a lot lately,
sure.
but the emotional labor associated with the people who provide elder care,
Mhm,
it's a really hard job, right? It's a lot of stress. It's
mhm.
all of it, right? And that this movie touches on this as well, right? This
Yeah.
is it's an emotional job for the people covering the story, hearing the when they're interviewing victims of the abuse, hearing their stories. It's very heart wrenching at times. It's very
Oh,
touching,
yeah.
and and this is just one type of job that has that. There are lots of jobs out there. So she worked in healthcare.
Mhm.
Um, you know, all the emotional load that the people working in healthcare have to carry every day.
Right.
And really commenting on, I guess for me, my comment is it makes me think about the support structures that we're putting in place in organizations to support
Mhm.
people who are either carrying a really heavy load, right, in their day-to-day jobs or just in general, right? Maybe they're caregivers or maybe there's other circumstances in their lives. Maybe they're sick themselves, honestly, right? And
Right.
they're carrying that. So I don't know. I don't know how much you thought about that as you watched this movie. I thought about it a little bit and then the broader context of how are we showing up for workers, right, as
Right.
organizations and as leaders.
I hadn't considered it when I was rewatching it, Steve, but as you're saying it, like, in my head, I'm playing through some of those scenes where Rachel McAdams, for example, is out. She was, trying to find some of the former priests, and
Hmm.
she goes up to the door of one, and he's answering the questions, and he's basically admitting it to her.
Yeah.
He's like, "I did this," but he says, "I didn't rape anyone, but I did all these things," right? Um, but nothing
Yeah.
was done to
Yeah.
whatever, and
Yeah.
and his sister comes out the door. Right?
Hmm.
And this is an older priest, former priest, and his sister is an older woman as well, so I'm sure he's having memory issues, I guess, and she kind of steps in and says, "Get off my porch, don't." And and then Rachel kinda turns and she's looking and they live literally across the street, like catty corner from a school.
Yeah.
And you can just see the weight of that knowledge on her, and you're right, I think that even now, so many organizations don't have something in place where you can truly go to speak to someone in the workplace. I'm
Yeah.
not talking about like, lots of places say, "Oh, we'll support your therapy, we have benefits for you can go elsewhere," but where is that place in our organization where you can go and like, she would have needed it that day, for
Hmm.
example. She could have gone back and been like, I don't even know how to process this,
Hmm.
right? Especially reporters. They're getting lots of really bad like bad news always. And I feel like
Yeah.
HR is in that spot. And when I worked in healthcare, I would say I would apply this to whatever organization. It was a children's hospital, and children come for treatment, and some survive, and many do not, right? Many die from cancer or long term illnesses, and they're there for months or years leading up to this. And we had something in place for the nursing staff, right? The people that care for them on a daily basis because they get to know the patients. We had never considered to do anything like that for the housekeeping crews.
Mm.
And what we learned was they were equally impacted by caring for these children. They were cleaning the rooms of the same children day in and day out. They got to know the families, they got to know the children. And if that child passed, it was a huge weight.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I would say, kind of back to your original question, I think that sometimes, even if we're trying to put things in place to help our employees deal with big issues, we're not even considering down the chain of our employees who else might be
Yeah.
impacted by what we're doing,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So, if anything you take away from this as an HR leader or as just a business leader, think about how something that happens in your organization or maybe your client or whatever, the ripple effects that has every type of job, so it's not just one job being impacted. But,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely in the case of the Boston Globe, I didn't see any evidence that these reporters were being supported from a mental health perspective and
No,
dealing with
it
these
wasn't touched on in the
admissions.
movie. Now, it
Could
perhaps
be.
was something that was done. I
Yeah,
don't
could
know,
be.
but it certainly wasn't touched on in the movie. And honestly, in a 2001
Oh,
workplace,
gosh,
probably would
right?
not have been talked
No,
about too much in a typical workplace.
no.
I
We'd
I
give
don't
them an
recall.
ERP phone number.
Yeah, EAP, right? Yeah, yeah,
EAP,
yeah.
sorry,
I
EAP.
worked a really long time in offices. You did as
Mhm.
well. I don't really ever recall talking about stress or burnout or mental health really at all until
Yeah.
2010-ish, maybe. I'm not even sure then. Like
Yeah, the
that,
example I gave would have been about 2010, 2011. So,
yeah.
yeah, that's when it started to be examined, I think.
Yeah. I think that for me, Trish, though, the last thing this movie made me think about some was this idea of um, institutions and the institutional. We touched upon this a little bit, but institutional reputation versus standing up for the truth and standing up for what's
Mm,
right, and
mhm.
really kind of framing it like as whether it's an HR question or it's a cultural question, like is the organization more concerned as a stance, right? Are we more
Yeah,
concerned with our reputation, our market share, our standing in the community, et cetera, our
yeah.
legacy, et cetera? Or are we concerned about the truth? Are we concerned about doing what's right? And do our policies reflect those? They do reflect those choices typically, right? But or
Mhm,
our actions reflect those choices, even despite what our policies say? And we talk all the time, right? About many organizations talk all the time about being people first,
mhm.
right? This movie challenges you as an organization and as a leader to think about that. Are
Yeah,
we really putting people first? In this case, the people were victims of terrible crimes, right?
right,
But
right.
you can think of abstract it a little bit, which is why we do these shows, right? Obviously dealing with this, it's very clear, but other times it's not so clear. And where do you stand, right, as the organization? Are we trying to protect our brand at all costs, right? Or are
Mhm,
we trying to do the right thing? And that's a bigger question, I think, but one worth at least thinking about.
yeah. I think you're right. I think brand is very important, obviously, for many reasons, especially when there are shareholders and such involved. I will say I like to be optimistic and think that most organizations do the right thing to the extent they can. But I would also challenge that and say in every organization, regardless if it's a 10 person, a 50 person, a 5,000, 500,000, right?
Mhm.
There are always exceptions to the rule. And HR sees this. And that's how we can come to the table prepared differently, I think, in giving that advice of you can't give special treatment to someone just because they're bringing in millions of dollars of
Mhm.
work, for example. I remember I had someone who was he had a really bad history of violence, we'll say,
Mhm.
and his boss well, what turned out to be his boss, they wanted to hire him even though he had this whole history of and we were cautioning against it legally, and long story short, we hired the person. He brought in so much money, great at sales, until he had an episode with a client, and so you know, I
Yeah.
think the thing is too, though, it's like even though we handled it I'm not saying what company it is, right? I'm still protecting their brand. And
Yeah.
so where do we as people feel empowered enough that we can actually say who hurts us? Who hurts our company? Who hurts, the employees? Like, I don't know. I just feel like we
Yeah.
still, at least our generation, I think we're still not openly talking about all of the wrongs that are done. And
Yeah.
people don't have to pay for their wrongdoing,
Yeah.
usually.
And there's certainly a lot of cultural support almost for I
Right.
I guess I'd say it this way. Those kinds of things in organizations, whether it's inappropriate conduct,
Hmm.
unethical conduct, violence in the case,
Hmm.
the example you're giving, I mean, they're especially in a larger organization, but they're not often isolated instances.
Right.
I mean, sometimes they are, but Often they're not because there's an undercurrent of, well, it's kind of okay, or you're kind of going to get away with it. Like it, it, and the movie talks about this too a little bit, right? Like when they're investigating, Priest Smith or Priest Taylor, or Priest Jones, whatever, they talk about, well, the story's not about that priest, right? Or these two
Yeah.
priests. The story's about the system. It's about the processes in place that
Yeah.
allowed this to continue. It's about the people at the top of the organization who knew about it, right? It was a failure of process and system and culture, right? It wasn't just these isolated instances. And I do think that's another, I guess, challenge for folks to think about.
Yeah.
Is the culture one that allows for instances like that to occur in the first place, and what happens when they do?
Yeah, and often I think people don't want to believe the worst about people, especially like a priest where you trust their word, you trust that they have taken these, you know, vows basically
Mhm.
of being, not just celibate, but like caregivers and, they're the ones who are supposed to be the moral authority on how we all live
Yeah.
our lives, right? And so that would be even more difficult, I think, to come out and speak of a priest in that way. But I think that much like they did, where they shuffled them to different parishes in hopes that that would just like go away, we do this all the time in organizations. We have bad actors. But again, if they're bringing in money, if they're good with clients, they get shuffled to a
Yeah.
different city or a different, client or whatever. And if you're a mid-level manager, you don't always feel like you have any power to do anything about it. Or
Yeah.
what if you're a more junior person in the organization? Who are you going to tell? You're going to risk your own job. So it's a lot. I would say this by the time the movie ends, and I don't want to, for anyone who wants to go watch it, we're not like giving a spoiler,
We're
but
not spoiler alerting
spoiling, but
an 11-year-old movie based on a
right.
true story, so
But I don't want to really say how it ends other than it kind of leaves you an unsettled feeling like this. Even though it occurred, even though it was fully investigated and changes did happen and people did have to have consequences, it's just a very unsettling feeling to think about maybe your organization, where you go to church, where other community organizations you're part of. Just makes you take a pause and think like, man, what could be going on that I don't know about?
Mm.
I don't
Yeah,
know. And would I say something if I
yeah,
knew? Right? So, yeah, this is a movie that definitely made me think, about a lot of different things in the
yeah.
workplace I hadn't thought of in quite a while. So,
Really good movie. It
yeah,
was one of my favorites the year we did the Oscar show that year, I remember. I can't remember
mhm,
specifically what else was up that year, but
yeah,
this one won for Best Picture. It was one of my favorites. It's very rewatchable, I think, too. I have
yeah.
rewatched it over the years a couple of times. Free on Tubi right now if you haven't
It
watched it in a
is.
while. Yeah, go to TUBI Tubi app on your smart TV or your phone and watch it for free. But
Yeah,
really good movie. Really, fun to watch, and
yeah.
glad great to talk about too today.
I think so too, and I'm glad we're doing this again. It's always fun to have watching a movie be part of my actual job. So
There you go.
I appreciate that the fans love it. And, yeah, I guess we should maybe say too, like, normally this is the time of year where we're doing all of the Oscar watching, right, to give our predictions, and
Mhm.
we've done that probably over a decade as well, right? But
Yeah,
this year we're gonna kinda lay back on that. We're not gonna I don't
right.
know.
While watching one movie as part of our job was doable, it didn't feel
Yeah,
like watching 10 more movies between now and March 1st was gonna fit into my schedule either this year, so
I know. It's like I sort of was giving myself permission to go to these things that was, like, work, and now I'm like, "Oh, I don't really
well, how
have
about
to
this?
watch
We'll pick
these."
one of them maybe and do
Can we
another
pick
Workplace Movie Hall
one?
of Fame in a few months,
Okay.
right? How about we do that?
Alright.
Um, Trish,
Alright.
this is super fun. A couple things real quick. Of course, go to hrhappyhour.net, find all the shows. The whole network is there. We're also everywhere where you listen to your podcast, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and more. Doing more with video. Check out the YouTube channel. That's HR Happy
Yeah.
Hour Live on YouTube. And the new podcast, HR Connection, launched. So
Yes.
congrats to Sabrina and Marie for that. And we're excited to have them on board the network. So I think that's it from me. Trish, any last words from you?
No, just I'm ready for the next movie. I think can we tease what it is? Can we say what it is?
Go ahead, because I honestly don't remember. You better.
Okay, so in May, we're gonna get everybody ready because we don't do these every single month, but in May, Devil Wears Prada 2 comes
Oh, of
out.
course.
and we're going to do this movie. So
Yeah, real time almost.
challenge
Yeah.
all of you, please, when it comes out, and then reach out to us because we won't be able to record until after. So we'll probably do it in early June, I would guess.
Devil
I'm
Wears
guessing
Prada
first.
2. I'm stoked for that. I will go to the
Right?
movies to see that for sure.
Yes, I want to see that in the movies. But anyway, but yeah, bring us any suggestions for
The
other ones.
Devil Wears Prada and Steve Wears J. Crew. That's
Is
going to be the
is that
subtitle
what you're wearing
to
today?
the
I'm
show.
wearing, I think, Hanes sweatshirt today. So
Very good. All right,
anyway,
good
all
stuff.
good.
So, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to our friends at Work Human, of course.
Yeah.
And for Trish, I'm Steve. We will see you next time on the HR Happy Hour Network. And bye for now.